Greetings to one and all, it's your old buddy Jay here coming at you with another Countermeasures game changer. Now this week I would like to talk about the third-person shooter Returnal. Now Returnal is a game that came out recently on the PlayStation 5. It was released on April 30th, 2021. It is a bullet hell video game, which is developed by a company called Housemarque and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment. Now, Housemarque have, they've done a lot of games over the years, and they have a very good reputation for this kind of bullet hell style gameplay, which is where you inevitably end up in these situations where, different lasers are coming at you, different bombs are coming at you, all kinds of all manner of nastiness thrown your way. Sometimes you're in a small spaceship, sometimes you're a person. It doesn't really matter in as much as the gameplay is pretty much kind of dodge everything and shoot back. Now that is something which has always gone on very well with their kind of 2D side-scrolling games. And this game in particular is a third-person game, so it takes the concept of that kind of bullet hell and it applies it into a sort of more 3D space where you control the camera as well as the character that you are playing. Now the game itself is the story. I'll just do a quick brief roundup. Is you are an astronaut called Celine. You're actually an astro scout, and it's your job to land on. Well, you're going to look at you're going to find a thing called the mysterious white signal, which you've obviously been sent out to find, or you've picked up on your scanner, and you land on the planet of Atropos, and basically you find yourself trapped in a time loop. Now, what happens there is that it takes the concept of a video game. You start the game, you play the game, inevitably you die, and then it resets, and you play through your lives again, as any sort of traditional game tends to be that way. If you're not playing an RPG, for example. But it actually sort of pushes that a little bit further in as much as it takes that concept on board as something that the character is starting to understand and experience. So you play for a little bit, you inevitably get killed because you're not experienced enough to know what you're doing. Then the game resets, and it always resets back to the moment that you land on Atropos, which is when your ship crash lands. So it's really quite a nice, refreshing take on something that's been done and dusted for many, many years. In as much as the character that you're playing, recognizing that they're basically being reborn each time they die, and that obviously plays into the idea that there's this time loop that's constantly reoccurring, and as you play, the game slowly develops and evolves and shows you more and more the story, whether you're kind of getting through these sections and actually moving on to different levels, or whether you're just repeatedly getting killed. It approaches both things in a very creative and interesting way that is a very compelling reason to keep coming back and playing. Now, I inevitably have died several hundred times playing this game. It's a bit like Dark Souls, if you like, and Demon Souls, in that, when you die, everything resets. But it does this in a very sort of, it understands itself in as much as your character understands what's going on. But what's interesting is you go through these rather large doors, and in going through these doors, a section will open up, and then you'll play through that section. That could be an exploratory section. It could be an area where you're actually fighting against different aliens. It could be an area where you're upgrading your weapons or finding new ones. But the good thing and the really creative thing about this game is that no single run is the same each time. So you're not constantly going through the same area. Actually, that's not true. You are going through the same areas, but not in the same sequence. So the game is completely randomized in as much as one run that you do through to a certain section to try and progress to the next level could be very different from the next run that you do. So it's very intriguing to find out, what the as familiar as you might be with certain sections, they don't always come up at you in the same order. So it changes the way you play, it changes the way you think about exploring. You recognize the areas, but again, the creatures and the aliens and the various other plant life, etc., that you find on this planet don't always appear in the same sequences as the same ways, which I find really, really interesting. I find it really, really engaging. It keeps you on the edge of your seat, and suddenly you're in an area where you're very familiar with the location. So like where we're running through the sort of woodland here, I've been in this location many times, but the sequence of events that can now happen in that location on this run are very different than the one that I first experienced when I played it compared to the one that I experienced after I played this, because inevitably I died at the end of this. Spoilers. So yeah, I think that gameplay mechanic and that loop is something that it has been tried in other games before to a certain degree, and I know that these kinds of games tend to be dubbed roguelikes, which is basically there are roguelikes and there are roguelites. And I guess the game is that that you start off your game, you run through, the things that you pick up tend to help you move forward into the next levels, and those things are randomly generated and can be different each time. Now, a roguelike is when you die and it resets and everything resets again and you don't have anything. A roguelite, I should say, is what this is, and it is a game where things do reset, but your character remembers things. She remembers Celine, your Astro Scout, remembers certain skill sets. As you go on, your character is progressing slightly, but what tends to reset are things like the weapons that you're carrying and maybe any other buffs that you've picked up on the way. And that again sort of starts to take it into the next level. So just talking about the weapons at the moment, you start off with a very basic pistol, and then as you progress through these these random areas, which each section is called a biome, and each of these biomes have a different set of sequences in terms of locations. Like I said, that is randomized to keep it fresh and interesting. And again, the weapons are also randomized. So it might be that I'll be running through this section on one playthrough and I'll be using a pistol, and then there'll be a rifle generated, which you could then pick up and use that in a different way. So it just changes the way that you have to think about these areas every single time, keeping it fresh, even though you're dying and starting again, which I really, really think is an amazing and really, really engaging mechanic. So as well as that, you are also collecting different artifacts and items that the enemies are dropping. So they drop these, I can't remember what the name of them are now, but they're these tiny little glowing crystals that you collect, which you can then use in certain areas to upgrade your weapons or upgrade your suit. You can pick up different buffs for your suit, and your suit itself is a sort of basic astronaut suit, which allows you to kind of jump with a jetpack, and then you can sort of skip forward really quickly. Like here, you use your jets to kind of move through energy weapons and things like that to help you stay alive, which again sort of is a throwback to Housemarque's traditional approach to that kind of bullet hell mechanic, which I think works really, really well. And as you're going through this, you will pick up those different buffs, and those buffs do something really interesting. So it will be something like it will give your suit a certain amount of more health or more integrity, as it's called, and basically that's a great thing because it makes you much harder to kill, but equally it will give you a debuff at the same time, which will be something like your weapons can only be at full effect if you're moving when you're firing. So it's things like that suddenly your gameplay has to change up again, because you have to think about what you're doing in these environments, the kind of enemies that are approaching you, and the kind of things that you have to navigate. You have to think about how that changes each time, and I do think that works really well. So you've got all of these things, all of these multiple things overlaid on top of each other that are constantly changing and evolving, and constantly keeping you on the edge of your seat in terms of how you're going to approach these individual sections in order to get through them. The idea is that you go through several of these sections, and then you eventually get to a boss battle. You defeat one of the bosses, and then that moves you forward into the next biome. Now, I haven't actually I've played this for probably about like 6 hours or something like that, and I haven't beaten the boss in the first biome. Now I believe there's 5 biomes, so it's quite a lot of gameplay there. I think people are tending to get through these in about sort of 35 hours as far as I can see, but I'm not rushing to do that because I am really enjoying the game. I'm finding it incredibly satisfying, and also what's quite good is that you can just pick it up, blast through a run, and pick up all the different bits and pieces that you need and prepare yourself for the fights, and then you get killed off, and then you basically rage quit and go do something different. But it is incredibly satisfying while you're playing. So I do think that in terms of all the mechanics that they've really worked out here, in terms of a PlayStation 5 exclusive, which is really pushing the hardware, or certainly starting to use the hardware in the way that it's meant to be, the way these developers can now use all this new tech, is starting to really show how creative you can get with it. And that's just from a kind of storytelling point of view. Artistically, I am a sucker for all of the old Aliens films. Any sci-fi movie that comes out, I'm just like, I'm there already. If the story's even half-baked, I just don't care. I love it all. And, this game just embraces all of that. There is a real kind of H.R. Geiger spooky feel to the whole thing, because, the style of it is you're in this sort of mysterious planet. There's like the the kind of environments you're running through, like old stairs, and there's a sort of broken down culture that you're slowly learning about. That's something that's really presses my buttons as far as the art direction of this goes. And it's obviously a throwback to there's like horror elements in here, there's body horror. That's another thing, which is there are buffs that you can pick up for your suit, like I said, but there are other elements as well, which are these things called parasites. So you pick up these parasites, and then you just basically stick one on your arm, and it gives you a different ability, and you can have up to like 5 of those at a time. So you can be running around kind of navigating these different areas, shooting these sort of antagonists that are fighting against you, and all the time you've got these kind of parasites all stuck to your body, all doing different things that sort of helping you and hindering you at the same time. And I just really love that. I really love that. So you're not just sort of shooting through this section, I know that guy's going to pop up there, I've got this skill so I can do that. Each time you start, you don't know what skills you're going to end up with. Each time you start, you don't know where the enemies are going to pop up, so finding the patterns is usually something that's an essential part of playing through any game, and especially games where it's fairly repetitive. You work out the patterns, and you work out the routes, you work out the styles, and where these where your enemies are popping up, etc. But in this game, that just doesn't really come to the forefront. It really doesn't allow you to sit still for 5 minutes, because it's constantly refreshing and changing. I absolutely love it. I can't bang on about it enough. Aside from that, there are also, I'm starting to encounter also, various dead bodies of my own character who has died in various different battles. So you'll be running along, and suddenly you'll see yourself having been killed, because you're stuck in a time loop, but some things remain after the time loop. So you're seeing dead astronauts everywhere, and they're all doing different things, and they've all been killed in slightly different ways, and sometimes they're laying next to an alien body that you've not encountered yet, so there's that anticipation of like new enemies. And I just think like it's just a beautifully crafted game. I love the art style of it. The writers, Evie Conan and Luke Moulding, I just think they've done an absolutely cracking job. Like I said, they're throwing in body horror there. They've got sci-fi. The sound design, I haven't got it here because often when I've got sound from the games, it has the music in the background. It gets a copyright strike. I don't really want to go down that route, but the sound on this is just second to none. The weapons sound amazing. The soundtrack itself is just eerie and spooky. The sound of the rain dripping on your helmet when you go into the menu system to kind of navigate through what your suit could do, and reading about the local lore, and picking up tapes of yourself recording just before your previous bodies have died, and all this stuff is going on, and the sound is just absolutely amazing. The rain on the helmet is an absolute must for me. I mean, that in itself, just in a sci-fi environment, I mean, you've got me already. You have me at hello. It's just really, really great. This psychological sort of horror genre set in a kind of futuristic space environment, I mean, bring it on, bring on the fiction. I absolutely love it. So like I said, I'm hardly any time into it at all, really, but I can tell you now that this is already a contender for the best game of 2021. No problem whatsoever. Now, it might not be for everybody. There is an issue that I'm seeing popping up every now and again, which in various chats and forums, saying that there's a problem with the length of time it takes to save, because there are no save points in this. You kind of run through, collect all your items and assets, and then you get to kind of a certain point, and then you die and have to restart. Now, that has never really bothered me in Dark Souls before. I got used to that quite early on. I actually think, as a gameplay mechanic, it keeps everything really high tension and high pressure, and I like that. I don't really want the pressure to be off. So if there is an option in the future to save at various sections, unless I'm just getting really fed up and wanting to power through the story, I don't really see the reason why you would want to do that in a game like this. The difficulty and that learning curve is part of what makes this game great. So like I said, I love the art style. The designer is a chap called Henry Mustonen. The director is a guy called Harry Kruger. I mean, these are all Housemarque. They've been knee-deep in Housemarque stuff for a very, very long time, and I just really love the way that it's going, and also there's a whole backstory starting to develop, where there's a space an astronaut following you in your dreams and things like that, where every time you die you see a little glimpse, a little bit more of the story. I just think it's an absolute masterpiece, and it's one of those games where I'm thinking about it constantly, because I want to get back to it, and when I'm playing it, I'm just like terrified, loving it. It's exhilarating, it's fun. I'm just wowed by the visuals. I mean, the way that they've used all of the ray tracing and the 4K and 60 frames a second on the PS5. I mean, it's just absolutely screaming, for Game of the Year, in my opinion. I cannot rave about this game enough. I really, really hope you get the opportunity to try it. If you haven't already, you must go out and get a copy of this now, because it's an absolute must for PlayStation fans. And hopefully it will come to some other platforms in the future. I mean, whether it comes to Xbox, who knows? But I do think that PlayStation is slowly weaning their catalogue onto PC, because they can see the benefit there. And hopefully one day this will actually exist elsewhere, because as far as an experience goes, I feel that everybody should try it at least once, because or 100 times if you like me, because I keep dying, but in death I'm happy, so why not? I absolutely suggest that you do give it a go. So that's my recommendation for this week, and I hope you like the review. If you could do the thumbs up, thumbs down, leave a comment, send me an email, whatever you want to do. I'm starting to get some good responses from people, and obviously it's the internet, so it's also an intrinsic cesspool of venting, which is also nicely leaned towards me as well. So whatever, open the discourse is fine. Please do get in contact, and I do really, really appreciate it. So I guess that's about everything I've got to say. So until next time, be good, stay safe, kind to one another. Cheers.